Fire, air, water, earth, mixed in cosmic alchemy to create the world of Esfa. Life's children were born of many forms and shared a kinship with their component elements. Selumari, or coral elves, born of wind and wave, as at home upon the sea as beneath its comforting surface. Ever questing, they sought the most idyllic of seaside promontories upon which to build their graceful coral-towered cities. So too did the Selumari ever seek to create the most ethereal poetry and songs to celebrate the harmony of tide and sky. The Vaga, dwarves, stolid children of earth and fire, tirelessly they strode the loftiest highlands of Esfa before shaping their craft halls from the living heart rock. They filled those halls with the finest crafted objects. Gem-encrusted works of art were created as a tribute to life's bounty of the earth and fire. The Vaga and Selumari enjoyed the satisfaction of laboring and resting in the midst of harmony and plenty. Younger races were born, and their cultures flourished through nature's beneficence. The elder races lived and worked side by side, with no more than good-hearted rivalry between each race's master craftsmen to see who might create the item of the greatest usefulness or beauty. Happiness and contentment flourished throughout nature's realms. However, not all were pleased with things as they were. Nature is bound to propagate life, but so too must death have his due. The Master of Decay grew jealous with the success of nature's children. In cruel mockery, Death spawned children of his own. The cruel Morel, called Lava Elves for their heat of their anger and the destructiveness of their rages, as much as their kinship with fire and death. Hot-tempered necromancers, they were the antithesis of everything that their sea-born brethren embody. Morel craftsmen found art only in the creation of tools of pain and death for their dark master. The swamp-dwelling trogs or goblins were created as well, born of earth, but reveling in decay through rot rather than destruction by flame. They were created in vile mockery of the peaceful dwarves, cunning and stealthy. These also practiced depraved necromantic arts. Trogs built nothing but dissension and strife as they sought to rule their own petty tribes. Assassination being the preferred method of ascension. Tools of death find value only in destruction. The peaceful dwarves were caught completely unawares by the ferocity of the lava elf's attacks. Many were slain before the dwarves learned to turn their hammers to the creation of the tools of war. But the dwarves did learn, and the lesson of death was well learned. The coral elves were also taken by surprise when the hordes of foul goblins exploded out of their swamps in a merciless frenzy of destruction, all in the name of their dark lord of decay. The coral elves learned to defend themselves, and then to strike back at those who would slay them if they could. Violence and death were everywhere. Tempers burned, and blood flowed as the fever of bloodshed swept Esfa. All races vied with one another for survival, as lines of battle were drawn across the face of Esfa. Death and chaos raged as all sought survival, if not ultimate victory. Some of the races called upon creatures that they had befriended to help fight their foes. Other races summoned fierce abominations, using the power of death's magic. The elemental forces that all of the peoples of Esfa call upon as readily as breath itself were twisted into hateful elemental dragons, capable of awesome destructive power. Finding too late that such creatures are much easier to summon than they are to dispel. Hungry dragons have no conscience. The constant tide of war did not dissipate as time passed. As the dead increased, they too bid death's will to join the fray. Even the denizens of the distant sun felt a kinship with the fiery chaos of constant battle and flocked to join in the raw destruction. This is the world of Esfa. Will the roll of fate allow you to master it?
Welcome to How to Play Dragon Dice. Dragon Dice is a game where battles are waged in a fantasy setting. In the game Dragon Dice, you use dice to represent armies of different fantasy races and monsters, which battle to control essential pieces of terrain. And the first player to capture 2 terrains of the 3 in the game wins the game. The game can also be won if the player has the last surviving units in play. I should also note that this is not to act as a complete rule set for the game. That can be found in the rulebook. However, this video may make it a bit easier to go through the rulebook. The 6-sided dice are our units. They are worth 1 health point for the small, 2 health points for the medium, and 3 health points for the large ones. Note that the dice in this video are red and black in color. That means they can cast red and black magic. The 10-siders are our monsters and are worth 4 points, and it should be noted that any icon on this die, unless otherwise noted, is worth 4. The 8-sided die are the terrains. They come in 6 types of color combinations that represent the color of magic that can be doubled there. You will also notice the icons on this die. The burst is magic. The arrow is missile. The sword is melee, which dictate the action that can be performed at this terrain by the armies that occupy it. The 8th face contains a special location icon, which grants a special bonus to the army that captures. The 12-sided die is the dragon die. It has 5 health and 5 automatic saves, which means it takes 10 damage to kill a dragon. The dragons are summoned into battle with magic and will attack an army on that army's turn. No one controls a dragon when brought to the battlefield. The 4-sided die are our magic items, and they will not be discussed in this video. Now to talk about the icons. There are maneuver icons. There are melee icons. There are missile icons. There are magic icons, save icons, ID icons, which account for whatever you're rolling for and are equal to the health worth of the die. For example, when a 3 health worth die rolls an ID icon, it produces 3 of that result. Then there are the SAI icons, and those will be discussed in further detail. There's a couple things that need to be said about SAI icons. They produce normal and or special results. They are not affected by magic. On the 6-sided dice, they produce the number of the same as shown. On monsters, they produce 4 of that icon or of that result, unless otherwise noted in the description. There are different resolutions, such as normal, unique, delayed, and late resolution. The Feral are a race of anthropomorphic animals that cast gold and blue magic. They can feralize at their initial effects phase, which allows them to recruit from the DUA into a terrain or promote a unit from their terrain by swapping out from the DUA. The Lava Elves. They are of death and fire, and they have 1 racial ability, and that is at Highlands their maneuvers count as saves. Here are a review of the icons. First the Feral, and then the Lava Elf icons for your reference. A 36-point game here. We're going to first divide our armies up into 3. These armies cannot be more than half their total force size. That's no more than 18 points. And then moving them to the terrains. Now we are going to do a horde roll. The horde roll determines who goes first and whose proposed terrain stays in play. This is decided by the winner of the horde roll. So here I won the horde roll. I'm choosing to have my terrain stay in play, so the Feral go first. Determine the army distances. We roll each of our own terrains and 8s are re-rolled, and 7s are turned down to set 6s. So here I land a missile result on my highland terrains. I pick up my campaign terrain, and I roll that, and I land a missile magic, and then I roll this, or the Pharaoh roll theirs, and they have to re-roll, and they land a 5, a melee. There's a recap of what was rolled at the start of the game. So here's turn order. We have the initial effects phase where feralization and special location icons on certain terrains take effect. We have dragon attacks, which only take place if there's a dragon at a terrain and an army at the same terrain. And we have 2 marches. They happen at different terrains where the army may maneuver and action, or just action, but the army may never action and then maneuver. Then you may retreat into your reserve or reinforce from your reserve in that order. The initial effects phase is skipped and the dragon attack phase is skipped. So he's going to make a maneuver. To make it a maneuver, you roll your army against the other army if they choose to oppose you and count up the maneuver results and ID icons. One with the most maneuvers wins. If the active player wins, they can turn terrain up or down. If the defending player wins, the terrain does not move, and ties go to the active player. Here we're going to do a maneuver roll. Phil's going to try to maneuver the terrain, and the lava elves are able to prevent the Feral to actually maneuver the terrain. So the only action they can take is the melee action. So the Feral, to make a melee action, you pick up the acting army, picks up the dice, and here I roll 3 damage. Lava elves roll 3 damage, and then defending army rolls saves if damages are met, and they roll 6 saves there. And then they can counterattack if they choose. So roll, and he lands some SAI icons. So he casts Hailstorm with the twice with the cantrip, so that resolves first. So I only got 1 save, so 1 hailstorm damage goes through. And then the roar affects 4 points of units and scares them off into my reserve. So he chooses the 4 to scare off into my reserve, leaving me with a meager amount of army to actually defend with. So here we actually make the save against the actual melee damage, and I only got 1, and 3 were dealt. So that's 2 damage went through. Back to the game, we're actually making the attack. He casts Earthen Armor twice, which grants him 2 saves. And then he only does a few points of damage. It looks like 2. And I do 3 saves, so I save against his damage. Then I counterattack. And I do a whopping 14 points of damage. His Earthen Armor soaks 2 of them. And then he saves an additional 5, so only 7 goes through. Now on to his second march. He makes a maneuver attempt, and I'm late in picking up my dice. Don't ask me why. And he actually wins the maneuver roll and turns it up to a melee phase. Then he rolls it for a melee attack and does a whopping 10 points of damage. And I only save 2, thus killing off 8 points of my units. After his second march, he now can end his turn by making his reserve movement, so he can retreat back into his reserve. Here's my turn, so I'm doing a maneuver roll, and I won the maneuver roll, so I turn it back down to a missile phase, and now I'm going to do a missile action. I can target his terrain he's at or an adjacent terrain. However, if there's an army at the terrain I'm at, so I'm going to shoot at him. It should be noted that there is no counterattack for a missile result. I did 2 damage, it looks like. And he saves with that. He saves with 4 saves. My second march, I move the campaign army down to 1 and move my home army into my reserves. Now the Feral's turn. They Feralize, so that's promotion right there. And then some recruitment right over there. So here the Feral army are underposed at my home terrain, so they turn it up, no problem. Here he attempts to make a maneuver roll, and I'm late in picking up my dice again. Pick up my dice. I actually win that maneuver roll, so it forces him to just make a missile attack if he chooses, and he results in nothing, so he just recruits his army back into the horde terrain. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about magic. There are 5 colors of magic. They are black, red, blue, gold, and green. Every spell has a cost associated with it. There are racial spells that only a certain particular race can cast. You must target those spells at armies, units, or terrains. Those spells have duration. They also have effects. And there are multiple castings for those spells, which either multiply the effects of the spell or target new terrains or armies. Then there's magic doubling, where if a die matches the color of a terrain, either one or both, they can double magic when they roll an ID icon when rolling for magic. Now for black magic, they double off of the DUA, or the dead unit area. To make a magic roll, you roll for ID icons and magic icons. The ID icons are doubled if they match the color of the terrain, so my red is doubled. So I make 21 red magic here, and 16 black. So with that, I summon a red dragon in this clip, and I bring some people back with Spark of Life. Now I'm taking now here's the continuation of the game. I'm actually taking a magic action from the reserve. You can only cast beneficial magic from the reserve, and you can't double any ID icons here. I bring back not 3 health points worth of guys there, and then to continue my game, I actually attempt to maneuver the terrain at his home, and he chooses not to oppose it for some reason. So I move it up to melee, and then I forcibly make a melee attack. So coming back again, here you see my melee attack. This is a clip from before. I only do 3 damage, and here we go again. Kind of showing this again. He does 6 saves. Uses cantrip to cast Hailstorm, which does 2 damage to my army. He also uses Roar and scares everything back into my reserve, except for a meager pittance of army, and I roll for saves. So you feel like going over that again. I only have 2 guys left over there. So here he's paralyzing, and then he's rolling the maneuver. He still beats me in my maneuver in spite of my 5 from the fly. And then he attempts to melee me. And I got no saves, but he only did 1 damage. I attempt to attack back, doing 4 damage. And he casts 2 earthen armors and produces 2 natural saves, giving him 4, and no one dies. So for a second march, he turns it to the 8th phase. So let's talk about the 8th phase. The active army that controls an 8th phase gets double maneuvers, double saves, can perform any action at the terrain, while the opposing army can only perform melee actions, and gains the special location icon benefit, like the city. The city grants the ability to recruit and promote at the initial effects stage one unit from the DUA. Applying modifiers. They are a subtraction, then you divide, then you multiply, then you apply the racial abilities that multiply or count as one result as another, and then you add. So if you have, let's say, double saves, and then you get a spell that adds saves, the saves are doubled first, and then added, not the other way around. So here's that magic action that I did earlier, where I summoned the dragon, and I brought some guys back from the dead. So I'm going to place a dragon by targeting his horde army, and then I'm going to just bring some guys back. So the Feral get to still feralize before the dragon attack. So here's he feralizing. And now the dragons. So before we begin the dragon attack, dragons are worth 5 health worth and have 5 automatic saves. If they roll belly, they lose those automatic saves. They also have breath, which deal 5 damage with no save possible and have some sort of effect. They also have claws, which deal 6 points of damage to an army. They have jaws, which deals 12. Tail, which deals 3 points of damage, and then the dragon is re-rolled. You can roll a treasure if you have a worm, which promotes an army, or promotes 1 unit in an army, sorry. And then you have the wings, in which the dragon does 5 damage, and if it's not killed, it flies away. If the dragon is killed, the whole army is promoted as much as possible. I roll my dragon, and I get a wings, which does 5 damage to his army. The army responds by making a combination roll. This combines the melee and save results. Here he landed a counter, which counts as saves and melee, and does enough damage to kill the dragon. Here's dragon versus dragon. Whenever you cast 2 dragons at a terrain and they're different colors, they attack each other. So you simply just pick up the dragons, roll them. Here, landed wings, so no one dies, just one flies away into the summoning pool, and the other black dragon stays to wreak havoc on the army that's there. Just a simple example. Now back to the game. Here, he's making a magic roll, and he lands 2 ID icons, which doubles his gold magic. So he casts a gold dragon, which turnabout is flare play. He then turns the unopposed terrain up, and then rolls his dragon. Here he rolls belly, so he takes 5 to kill him. And I do more than enough to kill that dragon, but I can't promote anything. So here I roll magic again, and I cast 2 dragons on either terrain. After summoning my dragons, I eventually move my one little reserve army back to a horde, to the horde army, to make a last stand, so you can try to keep him from taking that 7th phase, or that 8th phase rather. Here the dragon rolls a claws and he saves against it. And then here's the other dragon, so here I roll it and I get a treasure. Terrible. He still gets to roll a response to it. He still doesn't do enough damage to kill it. However, now he's going to make his maneuver roll to move that to the 8th phase, his home to the 8th phase. And yeah, he beats me with 4 maneuvers against my 0. So he wins the game. Pharaoh wins the game. I want to thank everyone that helped me out with this project. And thank you for watching. Hopefully this has helped you learn how to play Dragon Dice.